Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. I hope you guys all had a great happy new year, and on today's episode it is Steelhead opening week on my favorite river, the Mokelumne River. This is a very small river system that do have quite a robust return of steelhead, and for today's episode I will be fishing with roe and nightcrawlers. Contrary to popular belief, these winter steelhead do in fact bite. On a small river system like the Mokelumne, I like to treat the steelhead fishing almost identical to what I would treat fall steelhead fishing. All I will be doing is just free lining this roe. The gear and tackle I will be using is very similar to fall steelhead gear because these steelhead will run on a much smaller side, and yes, 5-pound leader do exist. In river system where bait is not restricted, my preference is always to fish with bait first, especially on opening week. The reason I like to fish with bait first is these river on opening week will often face a lot of fishing pressure. Rather than try to finagle a bite, I will feed the fish. As I was floating this bait across, I ended up getting bit. In a small river system like the Mokelumne River, a 5 to 7 pound fish is a very rare fish. These fish will often range anywhere from 1 to 4 pound, and these are often my favorite kind of steelhead to catch. Almost every fish I have caught in this river system will have an adipose fin indicating that it is a wild fish. However, it is a personal belief of mine that these fish are offsprings of hatchery fishes that have successfully spawned in the river. Therefore, the returnees or their offsprings will have an adipose fin. Unlike the other three river systems of the Central Valley, such as the Sacramento River, the American River, and the Feather River, the Mokelumne boast a return of much smaller fishes in size compared to those of the other three rivers. However, I find that these fish are really enjoyable to catch on ultralight tackle. This is a gorgeous little steelhead. I'll show them to you guys real quick, despite the weather being super cold and the secondary camera heating up, thus making it look quite foggy. But nonetheless, this is a very beautiful wild steelhead. Thanks for playing, little guy. Off you go. Another important factor I want to mention is knowing how to read water. It is extremely important that as a steelhead or salmon angler in general when it comes down to river system, that an angler know how to read water. In a river system, salmon and steelhead will always take the path of least resistance. So what I'm doing is the first thing in the morning I will target the inside seam of this run. I ended up getting bit at the very end of the swing. A lot of folks might ask, why am I using such little weight? The reason is I want to keep the bait within the eyesight of the fish. I don't want the bait rolling along the bottom and getting hung up. Therefore, every time I tick the bottom, I will lift the rod tip up. A lot of anglers that will tend to use a heavy sinker, what they don't realize that what they're doing is they're actually flossing fish. Yes, you can actually floss with bait as well. I've seen it done several times. If a steelhead truly wants to bite, it will bite the bait irregardless of the leader length. I'm using barely 20 inches of leader at most despite the low skinny clear water, because I know I can feed these fish successfully. And my response time will be a lot much faster compared to using a long leader. This is another gorgeous Mokelumne steelhead. It is bright and full fin. Hopefully it will make its way to the hatchery and have a successful spawn. Thanks for playing, little guy. Off you go. After catching that fish on the inside seam, now I will fan out and cast to the far side. I will let the bait slowly roll down, and every time the bait ticks bottom, I will lift the rod up, thus not letting the bait hang on the bottom. When it gets to the end of the swing, this is where most of the bites will occur, because at the bottom of this run is a bucket. This is why knowing how to read water is so important when it comes down to salmon and steelhead fishing or trout fishing in general, especially in rivers or streams. The concept is the same, just downsized or upscaled. I ended up getting bit again, and as expected, exactly where I thought the fish would lay. So hopefully today's episode demonstrates that bait can be extremely effective for taking steelhead regardless of whether it is winter steelhead, fall steelhead, or even if your river do have a true summer run fish. bait will in general, if not restricted, take steelhead successfully. Yes, these fish will actually feed. They are not feeding in the winter in a sense like they will in the spring, fall, or even some of those summer run fish that some coastal rivers will have, but they will still grab small morsels and offer them, despite the water being cold and with them having spawn on their mind. Yes, I am fishing with a barbless hook, thus making hook removal extremely easy. I will show him to you guys real quick and I will prep him for release. He is a small guy, but he is gorgeous nonetheless. Thanks for playing, little buddy. Rest up a bit and off you go back to the river. Now I will target the deepest portion of the bucket. This portion can be extremely difficult to target with light tackle, so I will cast very far upstream and let the flow of this run push the bait down. The weight of the row will also act almost as a sinker itself and slowly bounce along the bottom, but the key here is to not let it hang up. So I ended up getting bit and I knew right away that this was a much bigger steelhead. This is exactly what I'm looking for. These fish are so feisty and full of fight on ultralight tackle. I personally tailor my gear toward the size of fish that typically run in each individual river system. I find that in this small river system, most of these steelhead I can often get away with just by using ultralight trout gear or light action trout gear in general. However, if I were to be fishing my home river, the American River, or if I were to be fishing the Feather River, I will actually increase in my gear size for the run and strain of fish present in those river systems. The winter run steelheads in those river systems are a lot much bigger, so therefore I will tailor my gear accordingly to the sizes of fish available. In this river system, the size of fish will often range around this size mostly. So therefore, I find that ultralight tackle and light tackle will suffice for the sizes of fish I am catching. Now I will demonstrate that with these barbless hook removal is extremely easy. Yes, you can land steelhead on barbless hooks. Many rivers, particularly nowadays, do require barbless hook in certain sections. This is a gorgeous Mokelumne River steelhead. I'll show him to you guys real quick and I'll prep him for release. He's such a beautiful little fish. Thanks for playing, buddy. Rest up a bit and off you go. Another bait I like to carry along with me also is Nightcrawlers. I find that in small river systems such as the Mokelumne or the Trinity River and even the Klamath River, I can take steelhead successfully on Nightcrawlers. However, the key in the wintertime is not to use the full crawler, but use half the crawler. Unlike the springtime, where these steelhead after done spawning will try and pack on weight for their return back to the sea, I find that in the wintertime, these steelhead will often pick up small morsels of bait, more so out of curiosity, or in the event that maybe this bait is coming into their holding area, so therefore they're picking it up out of curiosity. I like to use Nightcrawler as a mop-up bait, and I ended up getting bit with the Nightcrawler. Some river system steelhead will like Nightcrawlers more than other. On my home river, the American River, the steelhead in the springtime, summertime, and fall will feed on Nightcrawlers quite heavily. However, as it approaches wintertime, I find that my approach will have to change in that river, where I will use roe a lot more heavily. The Feather River, on the other hand, I will not touch that topic. Those fish in that river, I can't decide whether or not they're resident rainbow trout or steelhead, or whether they even make the trip out to sea. Now this is a worm eater steelhead. This is another gorgeous little steelhead. He is small and very pretty nonetheless, and I know this is a male because he is starting to develop a kype. Thanks for playing, buddy. Oh, and he ended up skating away. Now for the folks, especially the old school and hardcore salmon and steelhead anglers that will often ask me, how could there be flossing in such tiny rivers? Well, for the most part in the last 20 years, many rivers, irregardless of size, on the west coast have shown an increased numbers of folks lining fish in general, whether it be for salmon or steelhead. And this is a great example of a flossing line that I ended up hooking into. Yes, even in these tiny little river systems and streams across the west in general, there are folks coming out to line fish or floss fish in general. This is a classic flossing rig. It is composed of a heavy sinker on one end, attached to a 12 to 15 foot leader, and I know that there is going to be a bead on one side and there's going to be a giant hook on the other, because the whole purpose of lining a fish is to snag the fish somewhere close enough to the mouth or head. Here is the bead, and on the business end, here is the giant hook. Yes, these winter steelhead do bite. There is no need to floss or line fish, especially in these tiny little river systems. After clearing up that snag, I ended up hooking into a fish in the same area where folks in the past were using the area to floss fish or line fish in general. So for all the new steelhead anglers out there, or for those wanting to try steelhead as a New Year resolution for 2025, I highly encourage you guys to try bait fishing for them in general where it is not restricted. And even if bait is restricted, try hardware fishing such as spoons or spinners. These fish will bite. There is no need to line them. I'm going to let the bait slowly rise up in the water column at the end of the swing, and I ended up getting bit right where the snag was, where all those flossers lost their lines at the base of that tree. I know that I can catch this fish. So overall, hopefully today's episode demonstrates that there is no need to line or floss these fish. In small river systems like the Mokelumne River, if you are new to steelhead angling, these small river systems are actually worth a shot in targeting. Their fishes might not be as big as some of those other rivers, or even like those of the North Coast. Yes, I will hopefully get an episode out on a North Coast river system, because those steelhead are a completely different creature to those in our valley system. As mentioned before, I personally am not a trophy fisherman, so I am as happy to catch a 1 pound steelhead or a 20-pound steelhead from something like the Smith River. This is a much darker fish. I know this is a male because he has developed a kite. He is slowly making his way up to the hatchery, and I will show him to you guys real quick before letting him go. He is a worm eater, or preferably I think he picked up the worm out of curiosity. He is still a very pretty fish nonetheless. I tried to show him to the camera for you guys, but he didn't want to pose for you guys on the camera, so he ended up self-releasing. Overall, it was a great day out on the Mokelumne River. There was quite a bit of fishing pressure today, but I still managed to catch a few steelheads for the camera. 2025 is off to a great start, so thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, tight lines y'all.